7 recent A-star examples to use in your A-level politics essays. So this will mainly be tailored to Edexcel. It will cover papers 1, 2 and the US for paper 3. And these examples are very good because they're contemporary and they're unique, which means very few other students will have them, which makes you stand out in the exam and therefore achieve higher AO1 marks. Okay, so first we've got an example for public bill committees, and these are best suited for essays on Parliament's functions, especially Parliament's legislative function. The example as follows is, in February 2026, the Public Bill Committee for the Cyber Security and Resilience Bill carried out detailed line-by-line scrutiny and debated amendments, while also taking oral evidence from experts and industry representatives. During the third sitting on the 5th of February 2026, MPs scrutinised clauses 1 to 8 of the bill and debated government amendments regarding the regulation of data centres. Minister Kanishka Narayan proposed amendments 11 and 12 to remove the Secretary of State as a joint regulator and instead make Ofcom the sole regulator for the data infrastructure subsector. So usually examples for public bill committees will show their ineffectiveness, for example, illustrating government dominance or perhaps the lack of expertise in the committees, especially compared to select committees. But no, this example is showing their effectiveness. In this case, they've executed a very detailed line-by-line scrutiny, and they've also taken evidence from experts and industry representatives. So a great example to show the effectiveness of public bill committees. Next, we have an example for pressure groups. Now, it's not the most contemporary, but it will be unique and it will show the ineffectiveness of pressure groups if they are not aligned with the government's agenda. So, for example, in September 2023, pressure groups such as Wildlife and Countryside Link pushed for the government to retain EU-era nutrient neutrality regulations designed to protect rivers from pollution caused by new housing. In spite of this, the government decided to relax house building regulations, with Michael Gove, former Secretary of State for Levelling Up, arguing it would provide a multi-billion-pound boost for the UK economy. So in this case, because what these pressure groups, so Wildlife and Countryside Link, what they were advocating for did not align with the government's agenda, they had no success, and therefore the success of insider pressure groups depends so much on whether they are aligned with the government of the day. Next, we've got a very recent example of collective ministerial responsibility under the Labour government. So, an example of collective ministerial responsibility can be seen in May and June of 2026, when several ministers, including Wes Streeting, Jess Phillips and John Healey, resigned before publicly criticising Keir Starmer's leadership. Defence Secretary John Healey, for example, resigned on the 11th of June 2026 after concluding he could no longer support the government's defence spending plans. So this is a great example to show how CMR is being well applied under the Labour government, obviously because these ministers have resigned before speaking out and criticising Keir Starmer. Next, we've got an example of the Backbench Business Committee being effective in scrutinising government policy. Now, students often avoid talking about the Backbench Business Committee. They often think it's too hard and it's a bit niche, but ultimately it's a great example of the scrutiny of government policy, and also you can include it in regards to the control over the legislative timetable. On the 13th of April 2026, the Backbench Business Committee scheduled a Commons debate on SEND provision and reform. During the debate, MPs from across the House scrutinised the government over delays to SEND reforms and gave concerns that proposed changes could weaken legal protection for children, with special educational needs. So in terms of analysis, you're going to address the fact that these backbench business committees are addressing areas that the government are often hesitant to debate, and also they are bringing strong transparency and accountability to areas of government policy. Next, we have an example which shows the ineffectiveness of Prime Minister's questions. For example, during Prime Minister's questions on the 11th of February 2026, independent MP Ayub Khan opened his question by saying that rubbish is building up right beneath my very nose, before looking down towards the growing group of Reform UK MPs seated below him, prompting laughter across the House. So evidently here we have the attention-grabbing soundbite aspect to PMQs, which doesn't engage in any meaningful debate or scrutiny and therefore shows PMQs to be ineffective. On the contrary, though, we have a recent example of Prime Minister's questions to be effective. A recent example of the effectiveness of Prime Minister's questions can be seen on the 24th of June 2026, when Keir Starmer faced his first PMQs after announcing his resignation. During the session, Kemi Badenoch used the opportunity to question the Labour government's competence, citing the resignation of Defence Secretary John Healey and a poll showing that 0% of teachers for Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson was doing a good job. So this example is good because you have detailed specifics. It shows the effectiveness of PMQs well. So in this case, Badenoch is not just focusing on making a mockery of the Labour government, but instead she is exposing failures through facts and bringing transparency to those key issues. Lastly, we have a paper-free US example showing congressional oversight of the president. And this is good because Trump hasn't been checked too much by Congress since he was re-elected. And so you now have a recent example of Congress holding the president to account. In June 2026, Congress forced President Trump to abandon plans for a proposed $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund, which would have compensated individuals whom he claimed had been unfairly targeted by the justice system under President Biden. Congressional opposition to the scheme, with Republicans joining Democrats despite the high levels of political polarization, forced the administration to abandon the fund. So even under unified government, where Republicans are quite strongly tied to Trump and his agenda, the two parties are cooperating to provide a strong check to the president. So a really great example to use for this essay. Okay, that covers 7 A-star examples you can use in your A-level politics essays. If you like these examples and you want hundreds more in tandem with A-star essay plans, send me a message on Instagram to get started with A-level politics tutoring.